Right, good morning. Everyone have a good weekend? It kind of feels far away already, doesn't it? Like it's only Tuesday, but kind of feels like it should be Thursday. I had a soccer meeting until 9:30 last night. So I'm coaching two of my kids' soccer teams, but all the way till 9:30. I was like, it's a school night. It felt late to me, right? Anyway, I hope everyone is hanging in there, kind of settling in, surviving first week and now into the second week. We'll keep going with chapter 1 today. We spent a lot of time last class talking about like these folks and the idea of abnormality. We're going to build on that today, looking at how we viewed abnormality in the past. So remember, these Ds were kind of the big focus of last time. And I don't think I mentioned this, but I love short answer questions like this on the exam. Like any kind of list of 5, or we'll have a list of 4 later today. Like a great short answer question for you might be, what are the 5 Ds of abnormality? I'll never make you write an essay or anything like that, but listing something like the 5 Ds would be a great question if you want to like circle it or star it or whatever in your notes. But we talked about how when people meet these guidelines of being deviant or kind of different from what is typical or normal, having distress and dysfunction and danger and duration, that we might then wonder about mental illness. And again, the takeaway from last time really being that it isn't necessarily always clear cut. And we'll look at the different criteria for every single disorder when we get there in a couple of weeks. We'll start with anxiety disorders first. But these are a nice guideline, right? So again, if somebody meets these, we might wonder if maybe something else is going on. And what we'll focus on today is we'll look a little bit at how we viewed abnormality throughout time, right? And then we'll look a little bit at what is treatment, what are some of the professions in the field. And I want to put this out there right in the beginning, right? The history of how we have treated mental health in psychology is just sad, right? It's awful. We've done awful, dangerous, just downright cruel things throughout history in the name of trying to help people get better. And a big reason for that is we just had no idea how to help people. Right? We didn't have any definition of what mental illness is or was at the time, so we didn't know how to treat them. Right? We did things like exorcisms and drilling holes in the skull. We bled people with leeches and put them in bizarre chairs and spun them till they passed out. I mean, just the list of things that we did in the name of helping people is really sad, right? But we've gotten to a good point today, and it'll be interesting to see, 10, 20, 50 years from now, someone will probably look back and be like, therapy, what a waste of time. Like we could just do this, right? There's always something new that's coming around. But if we go back as far as we have like recorded history of ideas around mental health, the first thought, if we look at like ancient views, was that people who had mental illness were possessed. All right, so mental illness was the result of evil spirits or magical beings. This idea that like the body and the soul and the mind were a battleground between good and evil. And if somebody was showing signs of mental illness, it meant that they were possessed. And so what we would do if they were possessed, we would try and drive the demon or the evil spirit out of their body through some kind of method. And there were 2 really common ways of doing this, and both of them very dangerous. A lot of people died during these procedures and sometimes suffered really bad kind of like brain injury, right? And we would think they were healed, right? If someone was really agitated and flailing and angry and loud, and we drilled holes in their skull, and all of a sudden they were quiet and subdued, success, right? Probably not. We just damaged the brain beyond repair. Right, but this was a very common practice, the first one being called trefonation. And you can see the image over there on the right. We would use a stone instrument to cut away circular sections of the skull so that the demons could escape. And again, as you can imagine, a lot of people died during these procedures. Right? We would cut away small sections of the skull, leaving holes for the evil spirits to leave. Much more common than that, though, were exorcisms, right? An exorcism being a way of like coaxing an evil spirit to leave a person's body. Traditionally done by an old priest and a young priest, right? If you like horror movies like I do, lots of exorcisms in horror movies. And the interesting thing about exorcisms is they're still practiced today, right? Depending on your belief system, if you believe in possession, in theory, an exorcism might work. It's like that placebo effect, right? If you believe that you're possessed and we perform a symbolic exorcism, you might get better. And if people believe you're possessed because we're looking at it through a religious lens, again, an exorcism might be something that you would explore. We're looking at things through more of like a scientific, psychological lens. So we would say that it was more biological or mental illness. But for a lot of years, we practiced these exorcisms as a way to rid people of things like hallucinations and delusions and things that were probably along the lines of schizophrenia. And as I mentioned, this is something that is featured in a ton of movies, and I just put a few of them up here. Anyone else a big horror movie fan in here? Yeah, a few of you. I love horror movies. It's the right time of year to be talking about these. It's never too early to start your horror movie marathon, right? Like I said, I'm already decorated for Halloween. I went to Lowe's yesterday and they had Halloween stuff. I was like, finally, the world is catching up to me. I've been decorated since like the end of July, right? So my kids are like, when are we going trick-or-treating? Like, not for like 2 months, but it's coming. Anyway, these movies, a lot of these feature exorcisms, right? And some of them feature this theme of, is it schizophrenia or is it a possession? And I think that's a really kind of a important thing to think about, like the exorcism of Emily Rose, for example, an older movie, but the whole movie is this trial trying to decide if this young woman was possessed and if we can believe in possession, or did she have schizophrenia, right? And what was it that was causing her symptoms? And this is something that pops up over and over again in these movies. And it comes down to what lens you view it through. Again, if you view it through a lens of faith, then maybe you believe in exorcisms. But through a lens of science and psychology, we would call it probably mental illness. And I have a little scene from the movie The Right, this one down here, a little bit older movie, but there's this debate featured in that movie. And I think it's a great example of that idea of like, is it mental illness or is it possession? So I'll play that scene for you. Nothing scary, which may or may not disappoint you. I don't know. Viewing it through the lens of faith, right? And so through that lens, the treatment is going to be an exorcism, right? And if we are looking at it through the lens of psychology, it might be medication, or it might be therapy, or some other kind of intervention. And he talked about a psychotic illness. Psychosis means that somebody has lost contact with reality. And we'll talk about psychosis later in the semester. The most common psychotic disorder is schizophrenia, where people see and hear things that aren't there. They believe things that aren't true. And oftentimes when we're talking about things like this, it's schizophrenia that would probably be the best explanation if we view it through a psychological lens. But again, lots of fun movies featuring this topic, something that was practiced a lot in the past, and a lot of people didn't make it through these procedures, whether it was the Trefinations or the exorcisms. Any thoughts, comments, anything before keep going at all? Yeah.
Actually, read the street, or more like exactly this. But like in Read the Street, there's like a lot of cases of like people who have disabilities and stuff like that who lives like far longer than they should have, which I think is like it's kind of like against this point that like people actually have like people like I don't know, people care about other people typically, and even though they have like mental disabilities or they like say they're missing a leg or not or something like that, they live until they're 50, which should be that time period.
Sure. Yeah. And different times, right? Different mentalities, different norms, right? Different cultures have very different views on disabilities, on mental illness, right? Speaking of schizophrenia, in Ireland, schizophrenia isn't nearly as stigmatized as it is here. For example, in Ireland, there's like a very big community approach of like you care for people who have schizophrenia, versus in the United States, it's more like we stigmatize and then put people in an institution, right? So different time periods, viewing things differently, taking care of people in different ways. It's interesting, as we evolve through time, things change drastically. Different perspective, if we move forward a little bit, and you'll see different perspectives, and we're going to talk about different models in chapter 2, different ways of viewing mental illness. This is a very different take. If we look at the role of philosophers and physicians, people like Hippocrates, sometimes called the father of modern medicine, He was somebody who believed that illnesses and mental illnesses specifically had natural or physical causes to them. He talked a lot about how physical elements could influence your personality, your propensity toward mental illness and mental health. And specifically, he's noted for coining something called the humors. He talked about each one of us having 4 humors or fluids that flow throughout our body, and that these humors, depending on their concentration and their proportion, could affect our behavior, our emotions, and lead to different mental illnesses. And there isn't a lot of like scientific evidence to support this now, right? This was a kind of a cool idea, but it isn't necessarily grounded in anything in reality. But what he would do is he would remove blood from a patient or from an individual, and he would let it settle. And when blood settles, naturally, it separates into 3 different layers. He added a 4th layer at the bottom, but it separates into 3 layers if you let blood sit for a long period of time. And what happens is he would look at the proportion of these different humors or fluids, and then would decide what the treatment would be in order to adjust them. Oftentimes, again, practicing very dangerous procedures that people died as part of. But he talked about 4 humors: yellow bile, black bile, blood, and phlegm. These sound like wonderful things, right? Let's look at how much phlegm do you have in your body versus bile is something that's produced by your liver. But if you, again, were to remove blood, I'm going to draw, like if I draw like a little beaker, I'm not a great artistic person. I guess that could be worse. But, and then you, again, if you were to let blood like sit or settle, you would get these 4 different layers according to Hippocrates. So on the top layer, at the very top of this, you get the yellow bile. And the yellow bile, if you look at what it would actually be made up of, this is like the yellow serum or the plasma in blood. So it's grounded in a good idea, right? But again, not really thought to be supported by evidence. So yellow bile, if somebody had too much yellow bile, we would say that they were frenzied. Like maybe they had like ADHD, almost like symptoms where they were very hyperactive, too much energy, too much, not an ability to calm down, if you will. So again, each one of these would kind of lead to certain problems. Too much yellow bile being that you would have like frenzied or kind of hyperactive activity. Underneath that, we would get the phlegm. And the phlegm is thought to be made of like the white blood cells. And so if somebody had a high proportion of phlegm, it was thought that they were very lazy, like apathetic, tired, and lazy. And again, with each one of these, what would happen is then there was like a prescribed treatment. So for example, if you had too much phlegm, the treatment for that was therapeutic vomiting. We would give you herbs to make you vomit to get the phlegm out of your system to then restore you to balance. Dangerous, right? Oftentimes making people vomit like excessively in the name of reducing the amount of phlegm that you have. Underneath that, you have the blood. Okay, and the blood layer would be made up of the red blood cells. And if somebody had too much blood, like an excess of blood, it was thought that they were overly cheerful, which doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world, right? You're overly cheerful, but we could maybe equate that to something like mania, which we'll talk about with bipolar disorder. So somebody who was like manic, kind of in excess levels of cheerfulness and like being up. And the treatment for too much blood was to do something called bloodletting, to remove blood from the body, which was often done with leeches. So you put leeches all over an individual, which would pull blood out, and it was thought to restore them to balance or kind of back to neutral. The last one on the bottom is the black bile. And this isn't a layer that really kind of naturally exists. It was like just the dark, sludgy bottom, a very small layer. But if somebody had too much black bile, it was thought that they had unshakable sadness. Right, so they were very like melancholic, very sad or depressed. And again, with each one of these, right, depending on the proportion, it was just thought to affect your behavior. He also said your personality, but for the purposes of what we're looking at, these things were correlated with mental illness. So just a very different take. We went from, you know, it being the work of demons and possession to thinking that mental illness maybe had a natural or physical cause, maybe more of like a medical perspective. So you see this shift that happens just constantly, right? We view it one way and then another as we learn new information and keep growing and learning more in the field. Yeah.
Was this the greatest results like in people that like ever after like what was restaurant was it represented most like that?
Yeah.
Phlegm, like did he is that repeating?
Yeah.
Patients?
Yeah, so what he would do is do this repeatedly and then look for like correlations between the two. So, and that's where the weakness comes in. It's not necessarily causing it as much as they were maybe connected.
Okay.
So yeah, he would do this and then look at the behavior and then come up with those conclusions. And then through trial and error, okay, well, let's do some therapeutic vomiting and see if that makes it better. Right. Well, if somebody has too much like phlegm and they're like lazy and like you have them therapeutically vomit, I guess that might increase their activity. So it was a lot of like correlational stuff. And when we had better knowledge and better like medical capacities, we see that there wasn't really the connection that he thought there was. Yeah.
Is it like the biological view of it?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Is it like the biological view?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So this is like a very biological view, right? We're saying that your biology and your like natural makeup is causing mental illness. And so when we get to those models in chapter 2, it very much connects and correlates with that. As we move forward again, in like the Middle Ages in Europe, this was a very, very heavily influenced by religion time, right? The Middle Ages and the Dark Ages and so on, very powerful time of like religion and the clergy's power in Europe. So we go back to possession. Specifically now, not just like evil spirits, but Satan himself, right? The devil himself. So when people were suffering from mental illness, it was the work of the devil, right? And think about the witch hunts. The witch hunts were very common during this time, right? Burning people at the stake and things like viewing everything, any kind of like abnormal behavior is the work of the devil. Interesting, out of this time, there came a lot of like lose-lose situations as they would try and test for this. And so what they would do, and you see it in this image over here on the right, is they would accuse someone of being like a witch, of being possessed by the devil. And they would put them on this long stick, like sitting on a chair on a long pole, and they would drown them in the water. Now, if they survived, they weren't a witch, right? And then they would drown, right? So if they drowned, let's say survived, if they drowned, they weren't a witch. We proved that they weren't possessed. Right? If they didn't drown, then they were possessed and they would hang them or burn them. Right? There's really no way to win that scenario, right? Lose. But oftentimes during this period of time, what we saw was the idea that people were possessed by the devil, going back to exorcisms and trepanations and things like that. So kind of a return back to those original mentalities. And as we move forward a little bit more into the Renaissance, we see another shift. The Renaissance was a very progressive time, a time of rebirth and like artistic thought. And so what we saw during the Renaissance was this idea developed called the asylum. And it was created by this doctor named Dr. Johann Weyer. And he came up with this concept of the asylum. He said, what if we take people who are struggling with mental illness, we put them out in like a big house in the middle of the country where they can relax and be free of the cares of normal everyday life. They can recover and get better. Now, when you think of an asylum, I imagine you don't think of like a nice country, like happy house in the country, right? What do you think of when you think of an asylum? What images like come to mind when you think of an asylum? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Other people, what do you see in your mind picturing the asylum?
Padded rooms.
Yeah, okay, padded rooms, like straitjackets, padded rooms. What else? Anything else? I picture like season 2 of American Horror Story, right? Like dark and like awful conditions. Yeah.
I picture that one season of like House MD where he's in there with like all the other people and like trying to finesse his way out of it.
Okay. So kind of like a packed.
Yeah, or like, you know, because I forget why he's in there, but you know, you can
Yeah.
see how the other people interact, and it's weird because he's like a magician, obviously, so he's like
Right.
finessing the system in whatever way. It's just
Oh my gosh, I haven't seen that show in forever. I'm trying to remember that. I used to love that show too. Yeah. Yeah.
Like security guards.
Okay. Security guards. Okay. I picture like dark, dirty, like awful conditions, right? Asylums, again, they were meant to be good, but that's not at all what they became. Right? Asylums became basically like warehouses for people who had mental illness, almost prisons, if you will. People rotted in their own filth. They were subjected to awful treatments and conditions, things that often killed them, forced to undergo bizarre and dangerous treatments. Very common for people to be locked in cribs like this. It was a restraining crib where they would put you in there and lock you in for days on end to subdue you. They would spin people in chairs till they passed out, inject people with insulin as a way to try and like calm them down. I mean, just awful, awful conditions. But it started with really good intentions, right? And we built on that later, but it was this new perspective that failed ultimately, but it was a nice idea from Dr. Johann Wehr. One of the most infamous, so most famous in a bad way, of these asylums was a place called Bethlehem Hospital in London. Probably one of like the epitome of an asylum, right? And this hospital is actually still there today, though it's been changed drastically, obviously, since way back during time. But these places, these asylums were massive, massive buildings. And again, in awful conditions for the most part. And Bethlehem Hospital, really interesting because it underwent a lot of name changes over time. It started as Bethlehem Hospital, then it became Bethlehem, and then eventually became Bedlam. Bedlam means chaos or madness. And it was thought to be a home for people who were mad, right? The first lunatics, if you will. But coming from this idea of madness, it developed the nickname of Bedlam, and it stuck. And I have a little clip from a whole documentary that was made about it. It shows you some images and like the scope and size of this place. But this is probably, again, one of the most infamous of all asylums. Let me show you this little clip. Yeah.
What year was this?
Oh gosh, like in the 1700s, probably. And like I said, it's still there today, but now it's more of like a medical hospital with a psychiatric wing. But yeah, like 1700s or so. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that people who were mad or crazy would be housed in these asylums. And again, unfortunately, because of the size and scope of these places, oftentimes people did just rot away in their own like filth and excrement and receive just awful, awful care. Right? We didn't know how to help people. So we would put people in these places to remove them from their everyday life and then not do anything to help them, or at least not do anything productive to help them. Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of pre-lobotomy. So we did trepanations more. So if you've ever seen, it's an older movie, From Hell, about Jack the Ripper. What they did in that is they took like a blunt instrument. So they took something that was about the size of like a pen, but it had little like really sharp edges on it. And they would put it on the head and they would tap all the way around the head. And it was thought to release the pressure in somebody's like brain and skull. It caused a lot of brain damage, as you can imagine. But that was more common during this time than lobotomies. Things like trepanations or kind of tapping around the head, restraining people, bleeding people. Insulin therapy was also really common. Lobotomies came a little bit later, where we drill a hole in the frontal lobe to try and release the pressure and cure mental illness. Right? Cure mental illness. Moving forward again into the 1800s, right? So we're in like the 1700s or so, the previous slide. When we get into the 1800s, another new idea came around. And this was controversial and revolutionary, and it was called moral treatment. What if, instead of throwing people into these asylums, we give people who have mental illness a sense of responsibility, we treat them morally, and we give them a sense of like purpose in life. People were like, why? Why would we do this to people who have mental illness? Do they deserve this? It was just completely controversial, but it inspired a whole new wave of treatment. So the idea behind moral treatment was to treat people morally, give them respect, right? Just because you have mental illness doesn't mean you don't deserve a quality of life and a quality of care. And so out of the idea of moral treatment came the state hospital. And the state hospital was supposed to be like the revamped, redone asylum that would have better funding, better support, better treatments, and be more successful. Unfortunately, the state hospitals ran into a lot of the same issues that asylums did. They didn't have enough money. They didn't have enough staff. They didn't know how to cure or treat people, but they were slightly better than the asylum. They were run by the state, right? And so they had a little bit better funding, but they were still these massive, massive buildings across the country that were supposed to kind of follow this moral treatment wave. And they did to a degree. And there's some really interesting pieces of art that came out of this time as we shifted to moral treatment. And I have them here on the coming slides. One of them here, this is a very famous painting of a man named Philippe Pinnell. And he was one of the first physicians to really embrace this idea of moral treatment. And so this is at the Paris Asylum for Insane Women. You can't even imagine what that place would have been like back here in this time. But he was one of the first to remove the chains from the clients, or the patients they would have been called at the time. So removing chains, stopping the bizarre and dangerous treatments. He would wander the halls of the asylum and talk to people. He was one of the first people to do that. He's like, oh, I could just talk to these individuals and gather histories on them rather than treat them through these bizarre and dangerous methods. So here's one piece of art that came out of this moral treatment wave. The other one is a famous painting called Dance in a Madhouse, portraying what was called the lunatic ball. And boy, would I have loved to be a fly on the wall at this thing. Can you imagine? They portray, you can see that they're portraying them as mentally ill by making their faces all disfigured. But the idea was that let's give all of these patients a social opportunity. And so they would throw these massive parties for all these people who are locked in these state hospitals and asylums. And they would have a massive like ball or like gala where they would dance and have music. And it was supposed to be part of this moral treatment wave. Really, I can't even imagine what that would have been like. It would have been so fun to be there. But a very famous painting from that time. Again, this idea of moral treatment. Let's give them purpose, meaning, and respect. Very different from the mentalities of the asylum and things that came before. Now, as I said, a lot of these places, a lot of these state hospitals ran into the same issues. A lot of them shut down. They were abandoned almost overnight. State hospitals were very popular up until about the 1980s, 1990s. And then they very strongly fell out of favor. I would say they were almost in their like heyday of glory in like the 1950s through 70s. And then they very sharply fell off. One of my first jobs that I ever had in psychology was volunteering at a psychiatric hospital in San Diego. My job was basically a runner. Like I would get to sit in on group therapy sessions, and if somebody needed something, I'd go get it. I didn't get paid for it, but it was such a cool job because I got to hear everything and be part of it. It really made me want to be a psychologist because it was so fascinating. But this hospital that I volunteered in is now a YMCA. Right? A lot of these massive state hospitals were just shut down and converted. Cal State Channel Islands, nice, easy, local example, used to be a psychiatric hospital. Right? I've never been out there, but people always tell me there's still buildings that are like kind of like cornered off or roped off, or like, I don't know if any of you have been out there. It makes me want to go like on a field trip. Yeah. Yeah.
But there's still like big conference buildings.
Yeah.
Not exactly used that much.
Mhm.
I've heard.
Sure.
The vibes with the psychiatric, more about what's there.
Yeah.
Are still intact.
Yeah. And always having that kind of like dark, like creepy vibe from.
I mean, it's like the place, the university itself, like pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
Like ones, maybe to like what style of psychiatric hospital is on. I mean, it looks pretty much the same. It's like
Sure. And you see places like this all over the country, right? When I was in college, I tried to take one random class every semester that I didn't need in my graduate program, not when I was doing my BA work. But as a graduate student, my partner and I would take one random class to push ourselves and just kind of expand our horizons. It was a really cool piece of advice that I had an instructor give me, and we did it as graduate students. I took a 1-unit class on Buddhism. I'm not an overly religious person, so I was like, okay, Buddhism, that would be really interesting to learn about. I'm going to go learn about it. And this 1-unit class, we got to go to a Buddhist monastery for the weekend. We stayed overnight. We slept there, we ate there, we prayed, we were part of everything for the weekend, and then we had to like write a paper about it. And what I didn't know when I signed up for this is that the Buddhist monastery was an old abandoned converted psychiatric hospital. And I was equally terrified and fascinated by that when we got there, right? They're like, okay, all of the women are going to be in this ward. This used to be a psychiatric building, but we've cleared the energy in it. So we're like, oh, okay. Like I was terrified, but excited. And so grateful because they separated men and women so we wouldn't be tempted by our partners. I have a partner who's female. So they put us in the same room. I'm like, oh, thank God, I was scared. There's a lot of spiders there too. I'm not a big fan of spiders. But we were in this like old green room with like green tile walls. You could just feel that like psychiatric hospital vibe from like the 50s, right? And it was so creepy and terrifying and yet fascinating. So many of these places that were these massive state hospitals were shut down or converted to other things just because they failed, right? And there aren't very many state hospitals now, right? They're more like wings of private hospitals or much smaller facilities. Yeah. They just didn't have the knowledge or the money or the staff to support people. And typically, so the idea behind a state hospital is if you are struggling with depression, right, or suicidality, let's remove you from your life, put you somewhere where we can help you and treat you. But then at some point, you have to go back to your life. And oftentimes by removing people from a situation, when they go back, it's just overwhelming and they relapse into it again. So it's better to treat people like more on like an outpatient basis than to remove them completely if you can avoid it. So they often just weren't successful. I found this really kind of cool montage. I was just looking for clips on this. And it was a montage that somebody made of abandoned psychiatric hospitals across the country. And I think it just, again, gives you an idea of like the scope and magnitude and feel of these places. So I'm going to play that for you. It's just a couple minutes and it's set to music. People in tubs and soak them in cold water, alternating hot and cold water, spray them down with water as a way to try and calm them down or sedate them at times. Just, again, a lot of bizarre and dangerous treatments. But just massive buildings, a lot of them shutting down or being converted. You see these in movies a lot, right? A lot of movies, again, a lot of scary movies featuring different types of psychiatric facilities, from ones that are more like for the criminally insane, people who have committed like severe crimes, like you would see in Shutter Island, kind of an extreme example in a way. And you see ones that are a little bit more like modern and traditional. This is a movie called Unsane. It's probably the most recent up here. Just lots of examples. And as a side note, if you've never seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it's like old school classic version of a psychiatric hospital. Have to watch it if you're planning on being a psychologist in any way. But just a whole range of different movies and shows. These pop up quite a bit, but they're not common anymore. Again, not a lot of hospitals being around today. We have a kind of a different focus now, where we tend to do a lot more of these things now than we used to. And so these are some of the current trends that we see since we've kind of let go of some of these hospitals. Medication, deinstitutionalization, private therapy, and prevention are a big focus now. Right? So medication, and we'll talk about medications all semester. We have a pill for everything, and a pill for the side effects that pill causes, right? We have a lot of medications for mental illness. We've come a long way since they started to be developed back in the 1950s. So we'll talk about a lot of different medications as we progress through the disorders throughout the semester. Deinstitutionalization was this practice of not locking people away in these massive hospitals. So when that started to become popular in the like 1990s or so, a lot of these places closed or were converted. So what's much more common now, rather than locking people away, is things like private therapy. A lot of people go to therapy, right? Like one-on-one or maybe small group kind of sessions, but going to what we would call an outpatient therapy program, where you go to a session and then you go home, rather than being like locked up in a facility. And a lot of those sessions, especially over the last couple of years, have become virtual. Right, with COVID, a lot of therapy went online, right? A lot of therapy was done over the phone or over some kind of like FaceTime, like or Zoom or something to that extent. That started to become popular in the late 90s, and it's definitely, I would say, almost at a peak right now or in the last year because of things like COVID. We also focus a lot on prevention. Let's see if we can identify issues before they become a full problem. What are some of the risk factors? And if somebody's starting to show those early, let's intervene before it becomes a full-blown problem. So these are some of the things that we focus a lot on now. And again, we'll talk about different types of therapy and different types of medication as we go through all of the disorders. There's also a little bit in this chapter about what is treatment. Just as we don't have a definitive agreement on how we define what's normal or abnormal, we don't have an agreement on how we define treatment, which is why there are so many different types of treatment that we'll go through. And a clinician named Jerome Frank came up with like 3 guidelines that any treatment modality must have. And these are super broad. And the nice part about that is it allows for a lot of different types of treatment. So the first is you have someone who's suffering, who seeks relief from someone who's a healer. Okay, so suffering can be anything, right? That could be a medical illness, it could be a mental illness, it could be any kind of suffering. And a healer can be anyone. It can be a medical doctor, a therapist, a priest, a shaman, right? It could be anyone, right? And so the nice thing here is that leaves it very broad. The second part is that you have a socially accepted healer, right, whose experience is accepted by the sufferer and their social group. So if you're someone who's very religious, maybe you view a priest as someone who would be your healer, right? And so you would go to that individual, you accept their knowledge and experience. Maybe you are more inclined to go to a medical doctor, like your family doctor. That's the person that you accept as being knowledgeable and able to help you. You would go to them. And then you have a series of contacts between the healer and the sufferer in hopes of producing change. All right, so very, very broad. And we'll talk about different types of therapy, medication, all that kind of stuff. But there's just as much disagreement on what is treatment as there is for how do we define what's normal versus abnormal. All right, so just something to be aware of. Lots of different treatments, just as there's a lot of disagreement on the other. Yeah.
Like for the first time, that is why people aren't there.
Yeah, I mean, that might be part of it, right? Yeah, and it starts to get messy, right? A sufferer who seeks relief, right? What if we lock you up against your will, right? Like you're saying, like that's a little bit different. And there are people who are committed against their will, even if it's just for a short time. And so that's why there's just as much disagreement. And I'm sure that's part of, the reason. A lot of it was the funding and the kind of overreach of these places, but I'm sure that played a role, right? There's a lot of factors that caused them to fail. Some of the professions in the field, there's so many. Anyone in here thinking of doing something in the realm of abnormal psychology, especially maybe? But I won't hold you to it. Okay. Well, what do you have? Do you have any idea what you want to do? Okay. Clinical child psychologist. There were a few other hands. Anyone else have like a kind of an idea? And again, you don't have to commit to it, right? But anyone else? Yeah, your hand up. What do you think? What do you think? Okay. Funded, interested, or not sure yet. Somebody over here did that. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. There were a few hands. Oh, there you are. Yeah. Okay, great, right? So many things you can do. And there's way more than are up here. Like forensic psychology is a very popular branch, right? People becoming therapists, working with addiction, working with just a whole range of things that you can do. Very degree dependent field though. You need at least a master's degree, often a PhD, in order to do several of the things that are up here. But a couple of big professions that relate to what we're talking about. Clinical counseling psychologists and psychiatrists. And I want to talk about the difference between them for just a moment because they're often confused. Clinical and counseling psychologists tend to do the same work, but they have very different levels of training, different backgrounds, and they make different amounts of money and so on. A clinical psychologist typically has a PhD. Right? So a PhD is like 5 to 7 years of schooling after your bachelor's degree. It's a lot of schooling plus internship hours. But so clinical psychologists tend to deal with more severe populations, like people who have more intense mental illnesses, doing a lot of assessment and diagnosis. They make more money than their counseling psychologist counterparts. Counseling psychologists tend to have a master's degree, so an MA. And in California, this is somebody you would call an MFT, a marriage and family therapist. I have a degree in counseling psychology. So I have a master's in counseling psych. It was a 2-year program, though some people took 3 to get it done. Typically, counseling psychologists work with people on like everyday problems like anxiety, relationships, maybe depression. Both of these first 2 individuals see clients for about 50 minutes. The therapy hour is 50 minutes. And then work with like a variety of techniques. So the work they do is very similar, but because clinical psychologists have more training, more education, they make a little more money and they tend to deal with more severe or intense populations. Psychiatrists are a little bit different. Anyone know what makes a psychiatrist different? Yeah. Yeah, they can prescribe medication. Very different focus. Clinical and counseling psychologists cannot prescribe medication. There are some states that have tried to make this like possible, but psychiatrists have a medical degree, an MD, right? And so they often have 7+ years of education plus specialty time doing internships. So they prescribe medications. If you go to see a psychiatrist, it's usually like a 20 to 30 minute appointment max. It's short, right? And a lot of it is like, how are you tolerating the medication? What are your symptoms and side effects? Very common for someone to see a psychiatrist and a therapist, which would be a clinical or counseling psychologist. So it's very common for people to see both. School psychologists work in the schools, right? So oftentimes assessing people on intelligence, mental illness, placing them with aptitude testing, usually like K through 12, very common. They also have a master's degree for the most part. Social workers are a licensed social worker, also a master's degree, couple of year program. Working a lot with the institutions of society. So social workers oftentimes coordinate services like a family with the school system, with the legal system, kind of coordinating people together. You can be a clinical researcher. You can be an instructor, like a professor. You can be a forensic psychologist. There's just so many different things that you can do. Though again, they are often very degree dependent. All of these require at least a master's degree, oftentimes a PhD. And as I mentioned, right, a lot of people go to a clinical or counseling psychologist. They're very, very common. And what I want to do just for a moment is there's a lot of like negative views of therapy. And I want to talk about that just for a little bit here because I think it makes sense to hear it right now. So what I want you to do, I want you to find like 3 or 4 people around you, whatever is convenient, like 3 or 4 people. Take a minute, introduce yourselves. It can be the same people from last time or different people. Branch out. It's up to you. But go ahead, find a few people, and then I'll tell you what I want you to talk about.
Hi.
Okay, so what I want you to think about, and I wrote it up here, as a group, and you might jot this down because I'm going to have you share. So you're not turning it in, but just remember what you wrote down. As a group, I want you to think about what are some stereotypes, associations, attitudes, anything related to therapy, therapists, people who go to therapy. It could be stuff that happens in therapy, stuff in the therapist's office. It could be things you've seen in the media or things you just come to mind when you think of a therapist. So for example, let me give you one, like the most like hallmark stereotype of therapy, right? Something that they would say. A therapist might look at you and say, how does that make you feel? Right? That's like my ultimate stereotype of therapy. And as a side note, the follow-up to how does that make you feel, and tell me more about that. Right? That's the other one. So I want you just to, as a group, come up with like a list, write down whatever you can come up with. What are some things that you think of when you think of therapy? They can be stereotypes or just thoughts and associations, things you picture in the room, maybe characteristics of people who go. You can also think about maybe any attitudes you might have. Do you have a positive attitude around therapy, a negative one? Are there any like cultural things in your family that maybe shape that? So I'll give you a few minutes and then we'll talk about it together. So go ahead and talk about that with your group.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of maybe yeah. You're willing? Yeah, so yeah, I was like, so yeah, you. Wait, what? Yeah. Well, I haven't. No.
It could have ended. For a moment. What are some other things that you think of? What do you think of when you think of therapy? What are some of the things your group came up with? Yeah,
Breathing exercise.
breathing exercises. All right, like deep breath.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, what else? What else do you think of? Anything? Yeah.
A person that doesn't talk a lot, he's learning wise and prepared with that.
Oh.
More like light on the question, more listening, and it just sits there and listens.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many of you thought of like someone who's male, just by like show of hands? Like an older, I always think of like they're always older with glasses in my head, but then you would think of like someone who's male. How about female? Interesting. So a little bit more on that. I always tend to think of like Freud. I don't know. It's like always Freud in my mind. Like, smoking a cigar. What else did you come up with? Anything else? Yeah.
Well, like when you talk to a therapist, you might not know how you feel. When you talk to them, they might tell you, and you be like, oh, you realize.
Okay. Like they know I heard you say like they know the answer and they help get you there. It kind of gives you that moment of clarity. There's another hand. Yeah.
I know this one. But a place to like find yourself and go a little deeper into this.
Okay. Okay. Great. Other stuff. What do you yeah, what else you come up with?
One of the stereotypes we talked about a little bit about therapy is like the idea that you have to have something really horrible happen
Yeah.
in your life in order to justify doing it.
Right.
Everyone wants to be benefit.
Yeah, right. Like to go to therapy, you have to be really messed up.
Yeah, you
I have
have
that
a
problem.
traumatic childhood, and that's like ridiculously crazy happened to you.
Right. And definitely during childhood, probably with your mother.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, something really wrong with you in order to be there. Yeah.
What we got from my group was saying that like a stereotype was one, it's like a negative view that sometimes you may feel judged by the therapist.
Sure. Okay. Right. They're judging
Might
you.
not open up the doors to you.
Okay, great. Anyone have anything else? Things you picture, maybe even too? Yeah.
Set the, I feel like the stigma of like seeing it's.
Okay. Yeah, and I think definitely in these last couple of years, the therapy rates have gone through the roof. Where as a result of things like COVID and the isolation that came during COVID, a lot of people sought out therapy. Kind of a big cultural change. Did you have a?
Yeah, so I would like the therapist is always sitting in this massive like leather chair. And then they have like the classic.
The therapy pose, right?
Yeah.
Like from.
And then like. I don't know, what's.
Client.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're like on like a sofa kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was waiting for someone to say the couch, but there's gotta be a couch in there. That's like the ultimate, stereotype. I'll show you the couch that started it all. It's notoriously like, it was really like uncomfortable looking, right? I'll show it to you when we get to the spot. But yeah, like therapist is a big chair, the person's client's on the couch, laying down, right? Talking about their dreams. Tell me more about that. Right? Yeah.
I just want to add on to that because they always say sit where you feel comfortable, but
Yeah.
it always seems like you know exactly where to sit and where you're supposed to sit. They have their place to sit. Like there's one place in the room, for some reason you always just know where you're supposed to sit.
Okay.
You know,
Sit wherever you want. I'm gonna analyze where you decide
Yeah,
to sit, right? Yeah.
It's like the people that have like more of questions. Like I guess it's my own personal experience that there's like they're not as easy trusting like therapists or therapy as a whole is the concept.
Sure.
And, maybe that influences but I've noticed I guess as a little steps on. You're not easy trusting therapy concept.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah.
Extremely intense eye contact.
I'm just staring at you, right? I like that intense eye contact, right? Okay. Do you picture I always picture like a note taker, like they're taking notes, right? Like always writing everything down and a bobblehead, like, Just nodding and taking notes. It's just in my mind, the stereotype. Degrees on the wall, maybe like a rock garden or a candle or like a Zen garden of some sort in there somewhere. It's interesting. I have one other stereotype. So my family believed in therapy, maybe too much, right? Like I know that I went with the belief. Like I remember going as a child, as a teenager, my parents were like so pro therapy was probably too far. But I'm sure I like cried and analyzed ink blots like as a baby. Like I'm confident that it was there. So I still go to therapy. Like I go every week. Again, you don't have to be messed up to go to therapy. It's just someone to talk to. And so I've always gone. My stereotype is always focus on self-care. My therapist says every week, don't forget self-care. Don't forget self-care. Like every week. And I just roll my eyes at her every week. Like, okay, self-care. But one time she said it wrong in an email. She had a typo. She wrote self-cake. And I thought it was like perfect for me. She's like, don't forget to focus on self-cake. And so I went out and bought a cake. My therapist told me to, right? And so now every time I'm like, focus on self-cake or self-care. Self-cake could be self-care, right? I can't think of a better way to care for yourself than to go buy a cake. But anyone come from a family or like that has really negative attitudes around therapy? Yeah, with any comments or thoughts?
Yeah, my dad is from like third world country, Iran. And so growing up, like, you know, obviously with that first generation American experience, you know, they're like, I'm so proud of, you know, the life I was able to provide for you type of stuff. And so that kind of same negative stereotype I was talking about before, like something really horrible has to happen in order to justify therapy. That's kind of how my dad felt about it. And I feel like a lot of, you know, first generation kids have that same experience where like, you know, they feel bad, you know, talking to the parents about mental health or, you know, asking them about maybe seeking therapy because then the parent gets offended. They're like, haven't I done enough for you? Haven't I created the perfect life for you? You know, just because your struggle is so different from theirs, you know, maybe when they were a kid, they just aren't capable of seeing how, you know, you in this circumstance would struggle anyway.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I heard that one a lot, right?
Yeah.
Too, you know, that just very generational differences and you know, and then you have the cultural component on top of it. Anybody else? You know,
My friend, so it's like this is like my mom with my grandmother, 60s. So it's like she's been raised in this mindset of like she's small. So
Yeah.
you kind of just have a strong arm in each other
yeah,
to get through life. And there is kind of a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Like, you're opening up, letting go. Kind of skews well, it's like a bad hand both itself to you there. And it always seems like a concept for them that seem
yeah. That's a very common one too, right? That you it makes you weak to go instead of just like, you know, shouldering it or dealing with it. That's like the old Bob Newhart one of like, just stop it. Like, oh, you're depressed? Well, just stop. Like, simple, stop it, right? There's your like, here's your bill, like, just stop it. That's all I'm gonna say to you. And my partner comes from a very traditional, like Hispanic family, Catholic family. I'm very popular in that family, as you can imagine. They're a traditional Hispanic family. I'm not the most popular, but their family doesn't believe in therapy at all. Like, it's a waste of time. It's a stranger. Why would you talk to a stranger? And it's a sign of weakness to go. Was there another hand over here? Yeah.
It was the same thing. Like my parents in Nigeria, in Nigeria, like my parents would say like, oh, like in Nigeria, everyone's crazy already. Like, and they really believe in therapists out there. And they say if you get a job like that, you wouldn't even make a lot of money. And I don't know, it's just kind of looked down. Kind of.
Yeah. A lot of people look down on therapy for a wide variety of reasons. Take the most common name for a therapist, calling therapists a shrink, right? Like, I'm sure you've all heard that, like that term. Shrink comes from the term head shrinker, right? And so if you've ever wondered where this comes from, head shrinker, it's a reference to comparing the process of therapy to the primitive tribal practice of shrinking the heads of your enemies. That's where the term shrink comes from. Next time someone's like, I'm going to my shrink, like they're literally calling them like a head shrinker, like to shrink the head of their enemy. That's kind of a cultural mentality we have around therapy. And it obviously has its advantages and disadvantages. I tend to be a big like believer in therapy because I have a degree in it and was practicing to become a therapist. My partner, like complete opposite. So it's always a little interesting. We butt heads on it. My daughter, Emma, a therapist came to their school last week and came into the classroom. She's in third grade. Came into the classroom and introduced herself, right? It's really common now. There are a lot of therapists coming into schools to check on the kids and talk to them and whatever. And this therapist came up and introduced herself and was like, if anybody wants to come talk, I'm here. Like, I'm here for all of you. And my little, like, 8-year-old Emma raised her hand, apparently, because our teacher reached out to us about this, raised her hand and was like, I really need to go to therapy. I'd love to go talk to the therapist. Went to the office and talked to her for an hour because she's been raised in like a family that believes in therapy and sees the utility of it. And she, in her mind, was like, well, why wouldn't I want to talk to someone for an hour? I can get out of class and go talk to somebody for an hour. And versus the teacher reached out to us and was like, well, your daughter really like wanted to talk to someone, needed to go to therapy. I'm like, no, my daughter wanted attention. And she had a full captive audience for an hour, right? So it's funny, there's so mixed mentalities around therapists. In general, I think most people could benefit from having someone to talk to, but we do have a lot of stigma around. So we'll talk about that a little bit, kind of the pros and cons as we go through. But yeah, lots and lots of stereotypes, lots of different professions and things within this realm. And that's our last slide for chapter 1. So what we'll do next class on Thursday, we'll start chapter 2. Chapter 2 is all about the models of abnormality. So like it's a different way of viewing abnormal behavior and some of the treatments in each model that we'll cover throughout the semester. Last thing I want to do before we're done today, I need to take attendance. I'll do that today and Thursday, and then never again. I'll just pass around a sheet. So I'll give you a moment if you want to pack up, and then we'll take attendance and we'll call it a day.